the latest development in the West Asia conflict, US President Trump says Iran has reached out to resume talks with Washington and the US has agreed. However, he asserted that any ceasefire between the two countries is now over. US benchmark indices trade mixed amid SK Hynix debut on Wall Street. Dow and S&P trading currently with minor gains, while Nasdaq sees some selling pressure for the week. All the three indices heading for fourth straight weeks of gains. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is set to chair a meeting with public sector banks and other financial institutions on Monday. Sources say FM is likely to take stock of the measures announced to mitigate impact of the West Asia crisis. Issues related to Mythos AI and banks' preparedness are also likely to be on the agenda. As ethanol blending debate rages on, a PIL has been filed today in the Supreme Court seeking direction to make regular petrol available alongside E20. Meanwhile, talking exclusively to ET Now, FADA President C.S. Vigneshwar says no major reporting issue of E20 fuel so far. Benchmark indices end the week in red, snapping a four-week winning streak as auto pharma stocks dragged markets lower. Meanwhile, realty and IT emerge as the top performers for the week. Broader markets also end the week with decent gains. Flows into equity mutual funds jumped by 26% to little under 29,000 crore in June compared to the month before. Meanwhile, SIP contribution hit three-month high, crossing 31,780 crore during the month. PM Modi lands in New Zealand, marking the first visit by Indian Prime Minister in 40 years. Received by New Zealand's CM Christopher Luxon in Auckland, the high-stakes visit is set to focus on trade and defence, marking a new chapter in India-New Zealand ties. Hello and welcome to Business at 9. I'm Shabani Gharat. Now, US President Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social, the Islamic Republic of Iran has asked us to continue talks. Now, we have agreed to do so, but the United States has stated to them in no uncertain terms that the ceasefire is over. This comes after the United States launched new airstrikes against Iran, and Tehran responded by targeting US-allied West Asian countries. To discuss this now, we're new developments in the West Asia crisis. We are now joined in by Karan Datta. He's a geopolitical and capital market strategist. So thank you so much, Mr. Datta, for joining us today on ET Now. Mr. Datta, first help us understand, now that the official formal ceasefire is over, can like a diplomatic breakthrough finally be on its way? I know that this is a question that we've been asking again and again over the past couple of months, but do we see some hope, some light at the end of the tunnel finally?
Good evening, Shibani, and thanks for having me on your show today evening. I come from the camp which believes that we're heading towards a peaceful era. However, the journey is fraught with short-term volatility. The reason why I say that is if you look at the last 30-35 days, there has not been too much action as far as war is concerned. In fact, it's just slowed down. There have been skirmishes, there have been ups and downs, but that's how this process of peace is going to take place. You must remember that there are three parties to this entire war. A lot of focus tends to go on Iran and the United States, but there is the third angle to this, which is Israel. All three put together have reached a stage where the Americans and the Israelis have achieved their war objectives. I think that it's very important for the audiences to understand that the that the war objectives have been met to a very, very large extent. And the Americans and the Israelis will now struggle to find targets to hit. So there's very little left to hit as well, as far as Iran is concerned. The Iranians, on the other hand, have also suffered, and they're trying to escalate the cost. The economic cost is what they're trying to escalate so that the Americans look weaker. Remember, there's a midterm election coming up. The attempt is to make Trump look weaker, and hence these skirmishes at this point in time. It doesn't take away from the fact that the medium to long-term prospects for peace are much, much higher right now.
And what will be the immediate impact now? This is coming in on, Friday, where, all this week we were discussing that how the official, ceasefire is over, and, there could be both or, as you mentioned, three parties ready to strike at any given point in time. And now suddenly there is again a talk of, like a conversation between the US and Iran. So how do you expect the markets to react, oil markets and markets to react to this?
So, Shivani, every time you notice that there has been, in the last 35, 40 days, if there's been a spike in, let's say, escalation in the war, on that particular day, oil prices have spiked and markets have taken a hit globally, but it hasn't continued. It tends to come back and revert back to mean the next day or the next 2 days later. So it's in the same spirit that we've got to see what is happening now as well. What happened 2 days ago was an escalation on that day, and the next day there were price corrections. Markets were in the red and oil spiked up. But if you notice day before yesterday, all of that has started to settle down. So the point I'm just trying to make is we've got to take our eye away from what's happening on a day-to-day basis and look at the slightly medium to long-term picture on this one. I come from the school of thought that, like I said, peace is around the corner. More than that, I think you've got to see what is happening through the lens of both Operation Sindoor and Roaring Lion are trying. The attempt is to stop state-sponsored terrorism once and for all. If we are successful in that, if Operation Sindoor was successful in that, and if Roaring Lion is successful in stopping state-sponsored terrorism, can you imagine what an era that means for global peace? And that's
right,
what
right. Mr. Datta, also I'm curious to know now, Iran had already launched regional strikes this week. Now, Trump's post on Truth Social says that it is Iran who approached them to continue the conversation. So is it again, we are going back to the game of, posterity and, who has the upper hand in these conversations? And what leverage does Iran aim to gain by launching these regional strikes and then reaching out to US for peace talks?
So Shivani, at the same time, is to escalate the economic cost. It's the weaponization of economics out here. And the reason they tend to do that is to kind of escalate the cost of oil. Attacked 3 ships. They ended up attacking Qatari ships and Saudi Arabian ships. And one of the Qatari ships happens to be of a nation which is trying to mediate in the peace talks. And imagine what is happening out here right now, that the Iranians are at war with the Middle East, and the protectors of the Middle East are Israelis and Americans. It's just symbolic of what's happening in the Middle East, that the Israelis and the Americans are protecting Muslim nations while Iran is attacking Muslim nations. So in that sense, the Iranians are also getting isolated further and further. So it doesn't bode well for Iran in the medium to long term. And like I said, that in this particular case, the Americans have also reached a stage where there's very little left to hit. It's almost a 20:1 ratio when it comes to targets. There's a company called Palantir, which has been involved in target setting, etc. And literally, they run out of targets to hit. Until and unless you start bringing down bridges and civilian infrastructure, that won't really be good for Iran at all. Now, the leverage Iran has, of course, is the Straits, and they've used that leverage as much as they could. Beyond a point, that leverage is actually going to hurt them. As the point I was making, hitting Qatari ships is not going to win friends for them at all.
Right. And, as you rightly pointed out, Iran is attacking the neighbors over here. Now,
Yes.
how do you see the Gulf hosts, who are actually like the mediators, respond to some of, these U.S. bases being attacked on their soil directly by Iran?
I think, Shivani, that's a really relevant question. And we are in 2026, we are in July 2026. The same time next year, in 2027, take a 12-month view out, take a 18-month view out. I think the Middle East would look very different from what it is today. I think this question you've asked is fundamentally the change of the Middle East is starting to happen. And it probably will look much more attuned to the West than it ever has been. And this is not about security, or it's not about who runs the defense. It's not about defense contractors running, security in Middle East. I just think that those countries, their ability to realize that structures that create terrorism need to be dismantled once and for all. And I think in the 12-month, 18-month period out, that will look very, very definitive. And that's what gets me to my point that I think I'm looking forward to a very peaceful era over the next 18 to 24 months, which basically bodes well for capital markets.
Right. And already we have seen the impact happening with the kind of split that is happening even in the OPEC and OPEC Plus. So with the UAE recently splitting and getting out of the OPEC and OPEC Plus, what do you see will be the larger impact on the oil markets given, there is no unity even in some of the largest oil producing nations in the world?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Shibani. The UAE coming out of OPEC is not a small step. It's, in fact, quite a big step. It's never happened earlier. There's another interesting piece that is beginning to take place as far as oil is concerned, and we tend to miss that. The Americans have become the largest suppliers of oil. In fact, they're now supplying oil to the extent that is larger than the Russians and the Saudis put together. So if there are some photographs, if you see some satellite photographs of ships that are transiting from the Gulf of Mexico and taking oil out from Gulf of Mexico, which basically means transitioning from the Gulf of Mexico, taking oil from the American coast and then coming out to other nations, it's gone up manyfold. So what is happening is that many nations are starting to come in and step in and become producers of oil to the extent that has never happened in the past. Even for India, we used to have about 21 to 22 nations that used to provide petrol and oil to us. That number has gone up to 41 and 42. So, in fact, we are now the fourth largest refiner of crude oil in the world. So, a lot of those dynamics are beginning to change. And this particular war has set the tone for, like the point I was making is that the Middle East starts to look very different. But oil dependency and energy security starts looking very, very different 18 months from now.
So much for joining us today on ET Now and sharing your inputs on the latest update on the Trump claims that Trump is claiming to have talks with Iran continue going forward. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me over.
Well, now moving on, U.S. markets are trading cautiously after a strong rally earlier in the week, with investors taking a breather while still remaining on course for the weekly gains. S&P 500 is trading flat, slipping around 0.1%, while Nasdaq Composite is edging lower by 0.4% amid mild profit booking in technology stocks. Dow Jones is also trading near the flat line. Despite the subdued session, the broader market remains on track for a positive week. S&P 500 is poised to end the week with a gain of nearly 1%, while the Nasdaq is set to rise by more than 1%. The Dow, however, is underperforming its peers and is on track to finish the week marginally lower. Well, on that note, it is time for us to slip into a very short break. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Business at 9. I'm Shubhani Gharat. Now, Bank of Maharashtra reported strong Q1 earnings with operating profit climbing 21% year-on-year. However, slippages increased by 22%, limiting sequential PAT growth. The bank's total income rose 15% year-on-year to 9,063 crore rupees, while interest income increased nearly 14% to 8,035 crore rupees. Net interest income, or NII, grew 14.5% year-on-year to 3,770 crore rupees and was up nearly 2% sequentially, reflecting steady business growth. On the profitability front, the bank's net interest margin, or NIM, declined to 3.79% compared with 3.91% in the previous quarter and 3.95% a year ago, indicating continued pressure on margins amid changing interest rate environment. Now, moving on, domestic mutual fund inflows remained resilient in June, with SIP contribution touching 31,800 crore, the second highest on record. Equity inflows strengthened while overall asset under management climbed to record figure. Those are the details coming in. And now moving on, Finance Ministry is stepping up its review of the financial sector preparedness amid the ongoing uncertainty in the West Asia. Sources tell ET now that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will chair a meeting with public sector banks and other financial institutions on Monday to assess the potential fallout from the geopolitical crisis. My colleague Prakash joins us with more details on that.
Well, the Finance Minister will chair an important meeting with public sector banks and other financial institutions to review the measures announced by the Finance Ministry to mitigate the impact of the West Asia crisis. You are aware of the fact that the Finance Ministry has already announced rupees 2.5 lakh crore emergency credit line guarantee scheme to support sectors affected by the West Asia crisis. And therefore, the Finance Minister will review the impact of these measures on these sectors, a very significant development coming in at this point in time. In fact, we have learned that the Finance Minister may review the status of foreign currency non-resident bank deposits, overseas foreign currency borrowings, and external commercial borrowings, which are important to strengthen banks' funding base and attract overseas capital amid rising credit demand. In fact, Indian banking system has witnessed sustained credit demand in recent years, while deposit growth is muted or relatively slower. Therefore, efforts are being made to diversify the capital base, a very crucial development. In fact, higher foreign currency non-resident bank deposits would strengthen banks' foreign currency resources, improve liquidity support, and countries' foreign exchange reserves. In addition to that, issues related to Mythos AI and banks' preparedness are likely to be on the agenda as well.
Now, sources reveal that WhatsApp has submitted its reply to IT Ministry notice on username feature. Government will now examine the company's response. My colleague Sumita gets us more details on this.
That's right. Sources tell ET now that government is at the moment examining WhatsApp's response to the controversy around the username feature. There was a notice as well that was issued by the Government of India last week to WhatsApp, and it was asked to furnish an explanation on the username feature. The very motive behind sort of unveiling that feature, and then WhatsApp in its defense had stated that the feature is not rolled out and it will only be rolled out later this year. And the fact that, WhatsApp, ever since it introduced that feature, it said that this is going to be an additional layer of privacy because people will not need to use their numbers, but they will only need to use their usernames, and that is an extra privacy layer. And it also said that it's going to be a unique username that nobody else will have. However, critics, including the government, stated and they expressed concerns over the fact that this feature could give rise to spam messages and impersonation, and the fact that there could be phishing, digital arrest scams, identity fraud as well. And in fact, this is essentially what the government communicated to WhatsApp as well, and which is why a similar notice was extended to Telegram and Signal as well. So now the government is going to sort of figure out and examine WhatsApp's response on this matter, what is WhatsApp's defense, and whether that defense is sufficient enough for another notice to not be issued to WhatsApp. And of course, we're still waiting to understand the government side on this and on what they really feel and think about this particular response by WhatsApp.
Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in New Zealand on the last leg of his three-nation tour during the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to New Zealand in 4 decades. Both leaders are expected to deepen strategic ties, with recently signed India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement taking centre stage. My colleague Sumita will join in with more details on this.
That's right. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in New Zealand. This is part of his three-nation visit amidst India's Act East push. And this is, of course, the first official visit of an Indian Prime Minister to New Zealand in 4 decades. The Prime Minister will be holding bilateral discussions with Prime Minister of New Zealand, Christopher Luxon. Both the sides are going to be reviewing the bilateral ties. And, of course, there is a possibility that there will be an elevation of the partnership that both the countries really enjoy. So, of course, the Prime Minister is slated to interact with prominent business and sports personalities. There are diaspora engagements that are lined up as well. In fact, in terms of discussions, well, a raft of discussions are expected to happen in sectors including trade and commerce, defense, regional security cooperation. They are expected to happen. Now, trade forms an important part, remember, because this is coming in at a time when countries across the globe are forging one-on-one partnerships in trade, trading partnerships. In fact, both India and New Zealand signed an FTA in April this year, and that FTA provides for zero-duty market access on 100% of India's exports and 95% of New Zealand's exports. This FTA covers goods, services, mobility. In fact, there is an investment commitment by New Zealand of up to $20 billion in India over the next 15 years. So, of course, those are very, very crucial aspects, and perhaps both the sides will be building up on what's already been committed. Now, one of the important aspects of this FTA is the fact that sensitive dairy items and agri items, they were excluded from this FTA. And, of course, both the countries are looking at reducing their over-dependence on blocks like the RCEP block. So, of course, that is going to be one key aspect that will be discussed and deliberated upon, and how trade can further be expanded because there is still a trade deficit between India and New Zealand. How to bridge that, how to boost that, and perhaps a timeline for the implementation of the pact, that could also be discussed.
Now, Odyssey team director Christopher Nolan and actors Matt Damon and Tom Holland received a rousing reception at Mumbai's premiere of the film. Watch this clip for you to get the feel about the excitement as they arrive in Mumbai.
Sure, coming to Mumbai again. This is not the first time I've been in Mumbai, but it is the first time we've had the chance to launch a film here. So you are amongst the first audiences in the world to see this film. By the way, did you like the film? So just a quick, who was better, Matt or Tom? Indeterminate. They're both fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for welcoming us. It's always a thrill to be in India. I've had the pleasure of filming here twice, once in Jodhpur, once in Mumbai. Every time we come here, it's very, very special. And for many years, I wanted to come here and launch one of our films and experience it with Indian audiences who are some of the most enthusiastic and knowledgeable cinematic audiences in the world. So it's such a thrill to be here in this fantastic complex. Thank you very much for being here.
Odysseus, we'd love to hear from you.
This is really just wonderful. You are the first. We've had a premiere already, but that's like our family and friends. So this is the first real audience we've been in front of that's seen the film. So it means the world to us that you liked it. We worked very, very hard on it. It was the result of thousands of people really pushing themselves and each other to make this happen, so that you could see it this way, filmed entirely in IMAX, and we're just so happy that you like it, and we're so happy to be here.
Thank you. Tom?
Hi, everyone. I would just like to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for always welcoming us with such open arms, with so much happiness and excitement and grace and love. I think no one brings an energy to a movie theatre like you do here in India. So thank you for supporting us. Thank you for enjoying Chris's amazing work. And I cannot wait to...
Now, France are through to the FIFA Football World Cup semi-final. Le Bleu beat Morocco 2-1 in first quarter final with captain Kylian Mbappe and Ballon d'Or winner Ousmane Dembele scoring within 6 minutes of each other. Up next, it's an all-European blockbuster as Spain take on Belgium for the second semi-final spot. And for the FIFA World Cup trivia of the day, here is a World Cup record that stood the test of time. Back in 2002, Turkey's Hakan Şükür stunned South Korea by scoring just 11 seconds after the kickoff, the fastest goal in the FIFA Football World Cup history. More than 2 decades later, no player has managed to break that incredible record. And before we leave, don't miss Football and Fortune, ET Now special on FIFA Football World Cup 2026, and as the tournament builds towards its grand finale, we go beyond the action on the pitch to decode the business of the football, from billion-dollar revenues and sponsorships to the global economic impact of the world's biggest sporting event. Catch Football and Fortune on July 17th at 9 p.m. only on ET Now. Well, with that, that's a wrap on this edition of Business at 9. Goodbye from me, Shubhani Gharat, and the entire team of ET Now.